Hello, guys. It's been a while. So today I'll be doing a presentation on Frankenstein. So basically, we're going to analyze all of the aspects of the novel, from the characters to the events to the significance of specific and certain events to the figurative language to the Enlightenment period and Romanticism elements in the novel, to all of these things and all of the horror and gothic elements as well. All of these things are incorporated into these videos. That way, after this video, you'll be able to write any analytical essay or just have a great idea and analysis of the novel. Now, I do highly recommend that you have the novel next to you, because I will be mentioning specific quotes with the pages they are on. So now it'll be much easier for you to take notes and also, keep up with the video, because this video will be extremely dense, but it will give you an extremely rich analysis. So let's begin. Firstly, keep in mind that I already made the video on letters 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as well as I do recommend that you join my Google Classroom, because I'll have all of these notes on my Google Classroom, as well as you can be able to ask me any questions, because you will have access to my email through Google Classroom. So if you need help with anything, I would be extremely happy to help you. So let's begin. Firstly, we have the Frankenstein family. This is it. And now I'll be explaining a bit more when we begin. So first, and then now we have the women and gender in the Gothic literature. So first, we have two types of women. We have damsel in distress. Now, what's a damsel in distress? A damsel in distress is basically a woman who needs saving by a man. And we have a lot of that in Frankenstein, and I'll be talking about that. And then we have scary, horror, crazy looking women who often have eccentric personalities. So now chapter 1. So firstly, Victor Frankenstein begins with the narration, and we are introduced to his family. Firstly, his father Alphonse, who is best friends with a merchant named Buford. Buford becomes broke, and later Buford passes away, and he leaves his daughter Caroline. Caroline is taken in by Alphonse, and then Alphonse and Caroline end up getting married, and later they had Victor Frankenstein. And then on a trip to Italy, Caroline visited a poor Italian family. Then she spots a girl named Elizabeth Lavenza, and that girl had beautiful blonde hair, and this blonde hair made her stand out from all of these dark-haired Italian children. And therefore, Caroline ends up adopting Elizabeth, and she decides that Elizabeth shall marry Victor. And then Victor and Elizabeth grow up together, and they are very close throughout their childhood. So now let's speak about the significance of these events, because as we know that these events are extremely enriching, and all of them really have a deep meaning behind them that Mary Shelley is trying to give readers. So firstly, throughout this chapter, the themes of women's role in society were displayed. Why? Because we know that Elizabeth and Caroline are both damsels in distress who have parallel stories, meaning that Caroline was saved by Alphonse from poverty and loneliness, because as we know, Buford was broke and he left nothing for Caroline. Furthermore, Caroline had no one, so Alphonse saved her. In the same time, Elizabeth Lavenza was saved from poverty and, being the fact that she was an orphan by the Frankenstein family. And also, we do know that there's a lot of allusions to the rhyme of the Ancient Mariners, because as we know, in the Ancient Mariner, we have really scary looking women, but in Frankenstein, we have women who are damsels in distress. Now, we're going to analyze quotes. So we have this certain quote that showcases a lot. So I have a pretty present for my Victor tomorrow, he shall have it. And one on the morrow, she presented Elizabeth as her promised gift. I, with childless seriousness, interpreted her words literally and looked upon Elizabeth as mine to protect, love, and cherish. So this is page 18. And basically, what does this quote talk about? Why is it so important? Why is it so significant? So basically, it manifests the themes of women's roles in society, because Elizabeth was described as a gift, which is kind of objectifying her and dehumanizing her. And in fact, she's made inferior to Victor because Victor is her owner in some sort of way. And also reveals the dynamic they have, this relationship where it's Victor's role to love and cherish and protect her, which makes her a damsel in distress, as well as it's really stereotypical. Furthermore, this quote can be interpreted as foreshadowing. It foreshadows the fact that Elizabeth and Victor shall get married, because their dynamic is really close to Alphonse and Caroline, because the male is, saving the female. The female is a damsel in distress who is in need of savior. Now, the next quote, my sister, since till death, she was to be only mine. So this is Shelley, page 18 as well. This quote can be considered as Gothic literature. Basically, it falls under the umbrella of Gothic literature, given that it's part of the fact that he sees her as a romantic character, and he calls her cousin. He calls her cousin in order to alleviate the taboo in the relationship. And this quote really emphasizes the dynamic between Victor and Elizabeth, because he describes her as his own property. And due to the events that have taken place in this chapter, Caroline can be described as an angelic and pure-hearted woman, because she has a caring nature. And she has a caring nature. Well, how can that be deduced? This can be deduced because she adopted Elizabeth and provided a good life for her. She is helping people who are less in need. And now we're going to be talking about something that's really important: colonial aspects. Now, this is a really important theme throughout the novel. It's talked about, but briefly, less than the other themes that are explored. So basically, Elizabeth was considered beautiful, and she stood out from all of these children because of her looks, because she was beautiful. She had fair skin, she had blonde hair. So now we know that this is the colonial beauty standards, what they loved, what they cherished. And now this can open a discussion question: is that if Elizabeth didn't look the way she looked, then would Caroline still have adopted her? So basically, this just talks about the importance of looks. And another taboo topic explored, and unlike I previously mentioned, that taboo topics are usually explored in Gothic literature. So Alphonse and Caroline's relationship, basically, the relationship is really taboo because it's more like a father and daughter relationship instead of a son and instead of a wife and husband relationship. Because as we know, Beaufort and Alphonse were really good friends, meaning that their ages are really similar, if not the exact same. Therefore, Alphonse and Caroline's age gap is the same as a father and daughter's age gap. Furthermore, it's, they say he strove to shelter her as a fair exotic sheltered by Gardner for every rougher wind, and to surround her with all that could tend to excite pleasurable emotion in her soft and benevolent mind, meaning that he seeks to protect her. And as we know, it's a father's duty to protect his daughter. And as well as we know that the simile is used where the way Alphonse treats Caroline, this care, this softness, it's the same as the way a gardener treats his exotic plant. So basically, this just sheds light on the dynamic they have and how he viewed her as his precious daughter instead of his wife. So now we're going to be talking about discussion questions. So Victor describes the first appearance of Elizabeth as her hair was the brightest living gold, and despite the poverty of her clothing, seemed to set a crown of distinction on her head. So basically, this shows how important her looks were, how much they saved her. So it confirms what I previously said in that discussion question, is that if it wasn't for her looks, then nothing would have really saved Elizabeth from the situation she was in. Her brow was clear and ample, her blue eyes cloudless, and her lips and the molding of her face so expressive of sensibility and sweetness that none could behold without looking on her as of distinct species, a being heaven sent, and bearing a celestial stamp in all of her features. So now let's answer specific questions based on that quote. So first, Elizabeth is described as a being heavenly, almost angelic as a child. We know that she is destined to be married to Victor, who we also know to be quite troubled from Walton's letter. Because of this contrast, do you think this relationship will flourish or falter? I'm sorry. So basically, this is really important because, as we know, they are quite foil characters, meaning that they have opposite characteristics, and these opposite characteristics shed light on each other. Meaning, if, let's say, character A is really aggressive, and character B is really angelic, then these two characteristics shed light on each other. The amount of aggressiveness character A has is going to in the same time display characters B angelicness. So this is basically it. This is not an example of Victor and Elizabeth. This is just an example for you to understand and the concept of foil characters. And basically, Victor and Elizabeth can have the law of yin yang in physics be applied to them because they are opposites, which can make them be completely combined together, making them a good relationship as their differences in personality balances each other. So in my opinion, the fact that Victor and Elizabeth are opposites will make their relationship flourish. They are foiled since Victor possesses the mindset of an Enlightenment period, as he's extremely scientific, values human over nature, and extremely selfish. The reason being that he caters to his own needs before others. Now I'm going to be discussing the Enlightenment period a bit. Basically, the Enlightenment, they highly valued science. They valued making changes. They valued the industry. They valued humans over nature. Whereas Romantics, they valued natures over humans. They valued their emotions. They did not like improvement. They liked to cherish and value the past. Now, Victor can be considered, yes, we said that. Victor can be scientific, can be considered a scientific individual due to his intense passion for it and the fact that he let education in the field of science take over his whole entire life. Furthermore, he used science in order to bring back life to a corpse. It can be deduced that Victor values humans over nature through his actions. Actions such as transgressing the laws of nature, the most significant action being that one where he gave that corpse life. Despite being told by his father and Mr. Cramp to disregard the study of alchemy, Victor disregarded them a lot. Victor is an extremely selfish individual, and this has been illustrated by Shelley throughout numerous events in the novel. For instance, after he left for university, he cut off all contact with his family and ignored their letters. He abandoned his creations moments after he created it, and last but not least, after his creation had been the cause of 2 deaths, keeping in mind that the people that lost their lives were extremely close to him. They weren't strangers, they were really close to him, and he did not own up to the creation of the monster, giving the monster the opportunity to take even more lives and accepting the fact that he was complicit to these individuals' murders. So basically, Victor is a selfish character, and he really values science and learning instead of nature, and he neglects everyone else in order for his own benefit. Victor's foiled, his adopted sister, who he refers to as cousin, and his future wife, Elizabeth Lavenza, is a selfless individual who pertains to the ideologies of the Romantics. Basically, Elizabeth is viewed as a selfless character because she looks after everyone in the Frankenstein household after Caroline passed away. In addition, she tried her best to help Justine get exonerated, but Elizabeth pertains to the ideologies of Romantics, since she is solely interested in her family, and she is described as a saintly soul who shone like a shrine dedicated lamp in our peaceful home. Basically, this is chapter 14 by Victor. Looking at it by applying the yin-yang theory that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, which was put forth by the Chinese decades ago, you can come to the realization that the differences complement each other, as well as they balance each other's energies. The reason being that Victor's intense character and workaholic habits shed light or showcase the extent of Elizabeth's serenity and angelic nature. Furthermore, Elizabeth is able to deal with Victor's self-destructive tendencies because she is the subdued female who fits the profile of the obedient wife at the time. Because basically, whenever Victor wants to take all the decisions, because usually Victor is the type of character to make all of the decisions, Elizabeth is really this obedient person, so she would let him take the direction, take the charge. Moreover, this can be proven since Henry, Victor's best friend, is the male version of Elizabeth Lavenza. This is so important due to the fact that they were both romantics and possess a kind, tender, passionate nature. Their genders, on the other hand, are what distinguishes them, what makes them different. Because we have to keep in mind that at the time, the gender you're born in determines your future and your role in society. Basically, this is often called as the gender lottery. Henry was able to have an education which gave him more ambition, whereas Elizabeth has no ambition because of the position her circumstances back then put her in because of her gender, because being a female was what put you in limits, it put you in a square box. Therefore, it is logical to say that Elizabeth and Victor's relationship will flourish, that reason being that Victor needs a subdued, selfish, and patient companion who is able to cope with his troubled and self-destructive ways. And as we know, Victor and Henry, his relationship is very successful, and we know that Elizabeth is the female version of Henry. Therefore, logically, it would make sense for Victor and Elizabeth to have a successful relationship, which is flourish. Now, in what ways might Elizabeth act as a foil to Victor? So I did previously mention that but we will go into further elaboration. So foil characters are characters who possess opposite traits, like I previously mentioned. Yet what makes them foil characters is the fact that their opposing traits contrast each other. By contrasting each other's traits, they shed the good and the bad in each other, like I previously mentioned. Elizabeth Levanza, being the nourishing, angelic, and kind-spirited individual she is, contrasts Victor's overly ambitious, selfish, and obsessive nature. Elizabeth's nature is the way it is because she obtains a romantic mindset where she values nature and family life more than anything. On the other hand, Victor's main purpose in life is glory, which ultimately led to his downfall. And furthermore, it can be concluded that the reason Shelley portrayed Elizabeth as a foil to Victor, as well as making her character seem so much more angelic and pleasing, as she describes her as the perfect human being, for two reasons. The first reason being that she wants to emphasize women's roles in society at the time and what is expected of them, therefore making Elizabeth the ideal woman, because as you know, back then, there was either the ideal woman who was a damsel in distress or the woman who is portrayed as crazy. And in addition, she wanted to showcase the fact that being a romantic is the right thing to do, and adopting the Enlightenment period mentality will lead to chaos. So basically, she in this character dynamic, what she is trying to do, the message she is trying to portray is two things. Firstly, do not let work consume you. And secondly, the romantic ideology is much more preferred than the Enlightenment ideology, because the romantic ideology would help you have a peaceful mindset, whereas the Enlightenment period ideology would just lead you to a downfall because of all of the stress and chaos it causes and interprets in one's life. And now we're going to be talking about question C. How does the representation of Elizabeth compare to those whom she initially lives with reveal bias, class bias of the time period? This is the colonial beauty standards, which were revealed in this chapter, like I previously mentioned, since Elizabeth was considered beautiful because she had blonde hair, fair skin, and blue eyes. This can be deduced by the language Elizabeth was described in. She was described as beautiful due to her physical traits, and as well as it was said that she stood out amongst the dark-haired children, and it can be inferred that blonde hair was superior to dark hair at the time, and this idea can spark the question, like I previously mentioned, if Elizabeth did not look the way she did, would she have been adopted by Caroline? So now let's move on to chapter 2. So the events that took place in chapter 2. So firstly, Victor describes his childhood with Elizabeth, and he becomes best friends with Henry Clerval, who is passionate about stories, about knights, and composing songs. And Victor's thirst for knowledge develops, and we find out that his role model is Cornelius Agrippa. Cornelius Agrippa was interested in alchemy, which is an outdated science which is giving life to a dead body. So this is basically the definition of alchemy. And furthermore, Victor witnesses lightning for the first time, which feeds into his curiosity even more, because there's an undying curiosity. Basically, the analysis. Victor and Elizabeth were full character as they were described as day and night. And Victor adopted the mentality of the Enlightenment period, as I previously mentioned, where he believed in science and valued reasons and materials, whereas Elizabeth was romantic and she was passionate about emotion and spirit. She was passionate, emotional, and spiritual as well. And Henry Clerval was sort of in between due to the fact that he was an intellectual, yet not in a scientific way. So basically, he cherished learning. However, he wasn't scientific in the way that Victor was. And as we know, it was, now we're gonna analyze quotes. So it was the secrets of heaven and earth that I desired to learn. So basically, this is a metaphor. And this metaphor illustrates Victor's extreme and blinding thirst for knowledge. Furthermore, it can be seen as foreshadowing his creation of the monster in further events, since his thirst for knowledge led him to create it. Wealth was an inferior object, but glory would attend the discovery. So this quote reveals the parallelism between Victor and Robert, because of both of them are willing to sacrifice their life for glory. So basically, this shows that they both have tunnel vision, because they do not care about the consequences. However, they just care to reach their point, which is basically leading them to the downfall and making them Byronic heroes, because as we know, a Byronic hero is basically his own greatest enemy. And then it was not and the next quote, it was not splintered by the shock, but utterly reduced to thin ribbons of wood. I never had anything so utterly destroyed. So basically, when this is let's just give you some context. So when lightning takes place and the tree vanishes, This symbolizes the power of nature, which is basically a romantic element. It can also be seen as a transgressor of a nature at the same time. So these two like views I just mentioned, they juxtapose each other, as well as in view of the fact that when lightning takes place, the tree disappears. Moreover, as the monster was coming to life, lightning took place. So now we know that the lightning is a recurrent motif in the novel as it pertains to the theme of danger of knowledge. Now, chapter 2, analysis. So basically, Victor describes how, even as a child, it was the secrets of heaven and earth that I desired to learn, and whether it was the outward substance of things or the inner spirit of nature and the mysterious soul of man that occupied me. Still, my inquiries were directed to the metaphysical, or in the highest sense, the physical secrets of the world. Even as a boy, Victor had been hungry for knowledge. He doesn't want to learn just anything. However, he wants to figure out the secrets of heaven. So now, how does this paragraph foreshadow him creating creating his creature in his adulthood? So basically, this quote sheds light on the theme of dangers of knowledge, of pursuing one's overbound ambition, as well as the fact that Victor has tunnel vision, and it just mentioned tunnel vision. So basically, it sheds light on the theme that of overbound ambition, since he was not satisfied with learning the knowledge he already uncovered by previous scientists. However, he wanted to find out new specific knowledge, and he wanted to be the one who was remembered and known for finding that certain knowledge. He wanted to discover. The dictation used helps us come to the realization that Victor was willing to transgress the laws of nature on his journey to uncover this discovery. Furthermore, he will be using the science of alchemy to do so. And now the secret of heaven and earth, the inner spirits of nature, and the physical secrets of the world. It was evident through these quotes and phrases that Victor wanted to find out the secrets that were never revealed by previous scientists for a specific reason. Because as we know, Professor Waldman was trying to warn him that there are specific limits, whereas Victor he did not understand these limits. And this is what differentiates us between Victor and Waldman. They're both really, really creative and scientific minds, whereas Waldman had a limit. He had this rationality in him, whereas Victor, he did not have this rationality in it. Despite the fact that he was advised by both his father and Mr. Cram to neglect the study of alchemy as it was outdated, it can be interpreted that Victor has tunnel vision, since he is extremely adamant about achieving glory, which is his life's mission, and is ignorant of the fact that he may be crossing boundaries that he should not be crossing. In addition, he is not considering the consequences of his actions and how implementing his goals may be harmful to himself and to those around him. The reason being that he does not even acknowledge the fact that nature has its own boundaries. This paragraph foreshadows him creating the monster through the language used by Shelley. The phrase "the mysterious soul of the man occupied me" indicates that he is curious about the way humans are created. And it is known that whenever Victor is curious about a certain subject, he will pursue it because that is part of his personality, as well as he is ignorant of all the consequences of his actions and does not acknowledge the laws of nature, therefore foreshadowing the fact that he will not cross the boundaries. He will cross the boundaries of nature by taking the role of God and creating life, or re-giving life. Now, the second question: if this is contextual proof that he is destined to create the monster, like he insists he is, if he claims he is destined to do this, then does this negate some of the blame he might feel? So might this make Victor a bit less guilty of what he had done? So on the contrary, this is contextual proof of the fact that he had extreme thirst for knowledge since his youth, shedding light on the fact that throughout his years of maturity, Victor decided to give in the need for an extreme thirst of knowledge. Moreover, as an individual who had adopted the mentality of the Enlightenment period, it does not make sense that he believes in fate. It does not make sense that the Enlightenment values logic and reason over time, and fate, as we know, is not logical. Moreover, if he had actually believed in destiny, then he would not have transgressed the laws of nature, because believing in destiny is somehow spiritual, which is a romantic trait. We can deduce that from Victor's mental process through narration, actions through his behavior, and the events and personality that he does not possess any romantic characteristics. This can be concluded since he does not even acknowledge the laws of nature. If he had, then he would have not created the monster, even pursued his studies in alchemy. Another reason the blame should not be negated is that Victor is an intellectual individual, so he can be considered smart, and he does have the critical thinking skills. As a smart individual and scientist, it is his responsibility to reflect on the possible consequences of his actions, since he has the mental capability to identify the consequences he may face before bringing a dead corpse back to life. Therefore, he can be fully accountable for his actions, as it was his responsibility to reflect on the possible consequences of his actions before partaking in them. So basically, this is it for chapters 1 and 2. I will be continuing with chapters 3 and 4 and so on, but this is it for part 1 and 2. And please make sure to write notes. Thank you so much for watching. If you actually want these notes and to be able to read them, please join my Google Classroom. Thank you so much for watching.